Welcome to the We Are Satoshi podcast. This is Kyle Huber, and today I get to speak with Austin Herbert. I first heard about Austin through the Bitcoin Audible podcast, and he actually tells the story about how he was in the gym working out, and he saw his podcast app actually show his name pop up on one of his favorite podcasts as the most recent episode. He thought he was having a stroke or was in an alternative reality, but it turns out that Guy Swann, the host of Bitcoin Audible, had came across an article that he wrote, and it got his attention. So he read Austin's article on orange pilling and opened the door to Austin realizing the power of attention. We also talk about why Bitcoin is scarce, what's unique about its decentralization, why take Bitcoin into self-custody, what the open source fitness protocol is, and how you can improve your health completely for free without changing your diet, without having to get in the gym 3 times a week, simply by walking 10,000 steps and eating during an 8-hour window. You can start to feel better and make better decisions that will have this radiating effect through your life. So I'm going to get out of the way. Let's get into the conversation with Austin Herbert. Here we go. Episode number 1. Thanks for being here, guys. Let's do it. Austin Herbert, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. Can we start by you just describing who you are, what you do for work, what do you do in your life?
Yeah, so we'll get the short version. So recently, I just quit my job as a producer for Mark Moss. He was an economics YouTuber, and I went full time on my own business. I call it Open Source Fitness. So the brand of that would be basically started with Bitcoiner. I believe in Bitcoin. And I wanted to give back to that community, and I realized that more Bitcoin information really wasn't the path. That was pretty saturated. So, what was my highest value skill? I was getting healthy, learning over the last 9 years. What worked, what didn't work, what information was bad, good, and I thought I had enough experience and expertise to start a business on it. So I started a business or brand called Open Source Fitness. I run it through my Twitter handle, which is _ Austin Herbert. And really that started March of 2023, and it kind of took off. So it resonated with the community, give people free advice, real good health advice that works, that are actionable, that, all that good stuff. So that was this year, went from about 2,000 followers to 14,000 followers. And now I get calls and texts from people like you, and we just kind of met through that kind of process of this year, right? So got to meet a lot of cool people, and that again just started that journey of starting your own business, which is quite a task, but it always is interesting and fun. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah. No, we're going to get into it. I love this conversation because, as I was telling you before we hit record, you and I share three big passions in life, which is health, business / entrepreneurship, and Bitcoin. So this conversation is going to span all 3 of those things, and they're all very aligned. But I would ask you to start off, why are you a Bitcoiner?
So I fell down the rabbit hole around not necessarily 2008, because I was a little bit too young. I was in like freshman year of high school, but something was wrong, right? So I always had this belief that like something doesn't add up. These stories aren't right. Like and then you do a little bit of research and you realize, oh, this financial system is really built on a whole bunch of nothing. So we went off the gold standard in 1971. But most people don't know that we've been on just a paper fiat currency standard for the last 50 to 60 years, and that causes problems over time. So it's kind of like the boy who cries wolf. It's like this is coming, and like, okay, well, it's been how many years since 2008 and nothing's happened. We've only seen all-time highs in stock markets, and nothing's fell apart, and everything seems to be working fine. But that's all papered over. Really, the underlying problem is like eventually this comes to, you can't just print money, and no one should have the money, the ability to create unlimited money. Like that creates a problem, especially when governments are taking advantage of it and not being even close to being responsible with it. So it's not only that it would be a problem if they were being responsible, but it's the fact that it's past the point of really returning to a standard non-debt system. So and then all that dip builds up, and then so that's the Bitcoin thesis that wasn't explained that well. Again, if someone could explain Bitcoin in a sentence, which I always get asked to, like I haven't found someone to be able to do that yet. So it's a long, deep rabbit hole of just like first understand your own money, and then I came to the conclusion that I think Bitcoin's the best solution from there.
Yeah, I'm always curious how people find Bitcoin. I think we're like the same age. You're like 30, 29.
Yep.
Yep. I was same age as you. I heard about Bitcoin when it was $23. And to me at that time, it was just money to buy drugs online on the Silk Road or whatever it was. So I had a few friends that would buy like 5 Bitcoins for $100 and trade it for like whatever acid or something like that. So for me, like I had this same awareness that you had at age 16, like, man, something about the official narratives that they teach us in school about history, and also what I was seeing just in the world around me. I was like, man, this doesn't add up. But I didn't make the connection to Bitcoin specifically. And I even knew the money system was rotten and the Fed was not an actual part of the government. Like when you find out the Federal Reserve I mean, it's good branding, right? They call it the Federal Reserve. So the average person just thinks it's like the US government, but it's actually a private bank, largely foreign owned, right? So, yeah, it's really interesting how ingrained our perspectives on money are, and we can come back to Bitcoin because I want to get just like kind of a high level across all three categories, and then maybe dive a little deeper. But yeah, there's just a lot of kind of synergy between taking ownership of your money, taking ownership of your health, and taking ownership of your business. So maybe talk to me a little bit about like the health side of things, because that's like what you've been building. 2 to 14K, man, that's really difficult to do. So obviously the consistency has been there. Like I follow you and consistently valuable, free, good information. Are there any strategies beyond that? Is it just sharing what you're interested in? What does your research process look like? Anything on that vein?
Yeah, so I would say one is just having a system. So if you have a system, you're not really too worried about the individual outcomes. You're more just like, okay, did I do my work to get the output out there this week? And then you kind of let the numbers fall where they will. So I think that's the biggest thing with content. Don't get too wrapped up in the numbers or too excited or too upset if you're having a good week, bad week. It's just, do the work. Numbers will accumulate and compound over time. I will say the initial, you want to get that spark. If you have some momentum going, getting that initial from like 2 to 6 was huge. It was just like, all right, can I grab attention? Do I have something here? And then now what I'm more focused on is really trying to monetize that because at this point there's not as much benefit for me to grow unless I get the right conversion of monetization because I don't need necessarily a bunch of money right now. It's like how much of a percentage of my following can I convert into how much money, right? And then from there, you can go back into mode of, okay, let's go and scale this back up. So right now, I'm not doing too much on the content side. I'm actually taking a couple of weeks off. I want to build new product. It's another thing with starting your own business. Like, okay, if you were going to go into a department and say, build me this, you're not going to go to the guy who's running all the content and doing everything. You got to compartmentalize it. So I just take breaks too. So I don't be scared to take breaks. And, that really have helped me is just be a rule of one guy and just like, okay, I'm focused on a product, get the product out, then go back to growth. And that's really hard to do. Um, because you feel like you're losing momentum and stuff, but you just kind of work it out and no one's going to know your own business better than you. So trying to listen to yourself and follow your own gut sometimes it might not be the advice that you're hearing, but it might be what you need. So that would be the advice on the business side is just, again, output and then, focus on that one thing. You got that one thing you're focused on.
Yeah, and
And
then
then,
maybe tie in the concept of the blue ocean, which is something you shared with me on our first call.
yeah, so that's just a completely new opportunity, that's why I decided to do Bitcoin fitness is because I didn't want to compete with the head people in the fitness industry, right? So I could go into Bitcoin, and we have certain fundamental views or about just life in general, and how things should be done. And there's a certain level of trust too. If you're a Bitcoiner, you again these principles they're fundamental into the asset. They carry over to characteristics of people who are attracted by them. So a lot of people are similar in the space. They're going to probably agree with a lot of my views, which in in fitness is just, it's little efforts daily. It's nothing big. It's again kind of like how I have the system for content. You just you do the protocol, you do your work, and then 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you're going to be like, how did I even get here? But most people in fitness, they go for, okay, I'm going to go all out for the 6 months. They get good results, they're feeling good, they're on a high, and then it all falls away as soon as it goes in the winter or something, right? The holidays come around.
Injury, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff. So just keeping that, less is more if you do it for longer. So it's really not about who does the most, it's about who does it the longest. I don't think a lot of people take that approach with fitness, which is also, again, the stack sats and just slowly accumulate sats every day. It'd be nice to just lump sum 20K into Bitcoin right before that, having an ETF and all this stuff. But who's been here for the last 18 months buying $50 a week? Very similar type thing. So that's just, kind of know your market and niche down. And yeah, that blue ocean is just finding basically a whole new opportunity that, the regular industry almost make like your own market. So there's a book called Blue Ocean. I recommend checking that out if interested in that topic. But that's a topic or a conversation that came up with actually my old boss. He taught me about the blue ocean, and that's what started this business.
I love it. Yeah, what I love about the blue ocean is that it's encouraging, not discouraging. So like you said, instead of trying to compete with Alex Hormozy or some massive influencer, it's like, no, I'm going to find my lane. We're going to take what we like from Hormozy and from Pomp or whoever and kind of blend it together with your own spin on it. So yeah, it's like there's enough there. It's so easy to get jaded and be like, well, why should I make content? Why should I put anything out? I should just kind of keep it to myself and be a consumer, not a creator. And I've found that creating, like, once you do it, you never regret it. You're always like, oh, I'm glad we made that. And then I mean, even to full circle it. When we had our first call, you told me, I didn't even know this when we chatted, but, and I believe we connected on LinkedIn. So maybe I'll ask you about like non-Twitter, like what else are you doing outside of Twitter? But, you were featured in Bitcoin Audible's podcast, which is, hosted by Guy Swann, who's a, big Bitcoiner in the space. And yeah, maybe just like, give me the thesis on that article. I'll obviously link it, the podcast in the article, because it's just fantastic. But explain it to me like I'm 5. What's orange pilling? Why do Bitcoiners care about it? And what are some of the things that you've learned about orange pilling?
All right, so yeah, orange pilling is basically just having that awareness as that 0 to 1 moment of Bitcoin. It's like, okay, Bitcoin was, you've either heard of it or like kind of like that story earlier. It's like people used to buy jug with it, you've been around it, but once you are orange pilled, you fully kind of understand like, oh wow, this might be the solution to like the world's biggest problem, which is every government has fiat currency problems. Like every citizen has fiat money problems. So everyone's looking for a store of value, and you're like, oh wow, I think Bitcoin is it. That's the orange pill moment, because you don't, once you're orange pilled, you don't go back. Like I've never met a Bitcoiner that's been truly convicted in this. Like, oh, there's a better option, or I think that this was. It's either you kind of like you're all on board, you get it, you see it, or you don't. And then once you have enough people that see it, it's like I said, it's either a 0 to 1, like you either believe in it or you kind of don't. So there's a huge disconnect between 95 to 99% of the world and Bitcoiners, because we all see the problem and we all want to help. Some of the article was like, I just want to help you. I'm not trying to make you money or do this. I'm just like, I'm trying to actually, if things go wrong, having a 5% position in Bitcoin could absolutely change your life here in 3, 5 years. So like the risk reward, it's just you're almost doing it like, but then it comes off that you're trying to sell your own, show your own thing and do all this. It's like, honestly, I found this thing that I think is going to really help the world, and I'm just really excited to share it with people. But if you don't see it, you sound kind of crazy, and that's kind of that huge disconnect. So the Bitcoin community got that and resonated with that very. It resonated with a lot of people, and I was surprised with all the feedback, because it was actually my first article that I wrote, and it was just an idea that came up. I was like, it was just like everyone feels this way. And then turned out after enough people read it, they're like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I can't talk to my family. I can't talk to my friends. They don't get it. They don't want to get it. They don't care about it. I just feel like I'm on this island by myself, even though it's their problem too. They just don't know it. So that was the article. And that was at the time I was just trying again. I didn't have the open source fitness brand. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I was trying to start my own business and generate attention. And I just knew again that I had something there with that article. I was like, I can tap into a lot of people and like maybe this does well and they'll spark. And then one day I'm at the gym and I see my name pop up on a notification, and Guy Swann read my article because I subscribed to his podcast on Apple Music, and my name popped up on my own phone. I was like, "Am I having a stroke? What is going on here?" Because I didn't know he even read it. I was in a
That's
Telegram,
insane.
yeah, I was in a Telegram chat, and he just happened to be in there too. And I said it was like a Christopher Nolan knockoff or something like that. Just something. I didn't try to get shill my own thing or whatever. It was like he just picked up in the podcast that he started recording. He's like, yeah, I was about fourth way through. I had about 3-4 projects I was doing. But I was like, screw it. This one's just fun. I'm gonna do this one today. And that's the power of attention. And like, so he had all this thing. I never had a one-on-one conversation with him. I never asked him to do it. He came across it. It grabbed his attention to stop his other 3 projects and do mine first. Never talked to him, right? So once I realized that, I started making all content like that, just like, or I tried to the best I could, just help people, engage with people. Before you sit down and write something, don't try to tell someone what they need to hear or whatever. Just like try to relate to them and like grab their attention in a way. And that was all again the same time that I was trying to go from 2,000 and I went to 14,000 followers. So that was like my one goal, is like grab people's attention, do this stuff. Like I said, so now it's on to the monetization part, which is a whole nother animal. So that was the article.
Yeah. One of the things you wrote in there was that it's hard to see the world through a non-Bitcoiner's point of view once you're a Bitcoiner. And yeah, I really resonate with that a lot. It's like I'm at dinner and what you name the topic, doesn't matter what it is. We're going to another war that just started. Well, how do wars get funded? Oh, they print money to fund wars. They don't raise
Yep.
taxes to fund wars. I don't see a tax bill. Hey, we're going to another war. We're raising taxes. No, they just print the money and we all pay for it with the silent debasement of the currency, the silent tax, right? So, yeah, I'm always at dinner. My family will just be like, "Oh, here it is again, the Bitcoin pitch," and that interaction over time becomes potentially negative and potentially like discouraging. So then you just kind of hold your tongue and you just look at other people and you're like, man, like all these people are so wrapped up. Most people have good intentions and they want to make the world a better place, but like you said, they don't know what the problem is. Maybe, I mean, largely because there's a lack of transparency. The fact that the money system is opaque and not transparent is by design. It's not by chance. So, yeah, I appreciate you just sharing your perspective. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say piggyback on that too is just what I found recently is just people don't understand that this can be an asset. It doesn't have to be in currency. There's such a disconnect with people in their mind saying like, "Oh, can I use Bitcoin to buy coffee?" Or like, "Who accepts Bitcoin?" It's like you guys are that's not even close to the argument. If you understood the money system and Bitcoin, that wouldn't even come up in argument because it's such a poor argument.
Straw
Because
man.
people use it for coffee, it gives it that's not what gives it value. That's not even close to what that's going to give it value. And it doesn't have to be what it's used for. And that's not even the progression of money, which is store value then medium exchange. So like at all levels, that argument is just terrible. And that speaks more of like, not to me try to debunk that argument. It's more of like, you just, the, to come to me and try to argue against Bitcoin and you don't even know those fundamental things. It's like, we're just so ahead of everything on the curve. And there's a lot of learning to be done. But again, some more of my background is I was in finance first. Then I
Okay.
went into the Bitcoin industry. So like, I worked with a small startup company. I was worked with like futures tradings and stuff like that. So I understood commodities and assets. And when I first started talking about Bitcoin with friends, it was always like, okay, well, look at these stocks. These stocks are outperforming. Like, stocks are just such a small niche thing. Again, money is solving the biggest problem in the world. That's just nothing else really interests me on the chessboard. And all they can see is like these tech stocks or, GameStop stocks and stuff like this is like none of that stuff interests me because I saw how big the problem was. And Bitcoin, when it says Bitcoin fixes everything, it literally is the foundation of just money runs the world, right? So like we have a terrible money and people don't get because we're promoting a new money. It sounds like we want it for our best interest, but they don't understand that it's actually for their own best interest to get off fiat currency. And that's just, again, such a rabbit hole that you can't explain in an hour or even 10. It's like,
Right.
so
Yeah. Even if I didn't own Bitcoin, it would still be in my best interest to share what I know about Bitcoin. And there's different schools of thought on like recommending, someone might come to you because they know that you're in and around Bitcoin. They'll say, hey, like, should I buy some? What's your answer? Where do you point people? Do you tell them to read the Bitcoin Standard? Do you give them some podcasts to listen to? Like, where do you start if this is interesting to you?
yeah, I definitely start with the educational side because even if you put, $1,000 in, this is the classic story of like, oh, I had 10 Bitcoin back in 2015 because I bought drugs with it online. It's like, okay, well, why didn't you re-up that $50 or $100 of your Bitcoin account? Like, because you didn't know what it was. You used it, you had it at one point, but if you knew what it
Sure.
was, you bought more. Like, you would have still had the same amount, if not more Bitcoin. So when people say, "Oh, I would have had this or that," it's like you never. So you always have to, no matter what the price is, you're gonna have to learn what it is because you will part ways with it way too early. You're always gonna have that story of, "Oh, I had this much Bitcoin at this time." It's like, okay, well, if you knew what you had, you shouldn't be looking at it in price in dollars, right? And it's a little bit of a stretch to not look at dollars at all. Because personally, like I do live on basically a Bitcoin standard. I still use cash and stuff. I just pull out. I'm pretty much just all my savings and funding is in Bitcoin because again, I used to do markets. I don't see a better asset, risk reward, upside, and I'm okay with the volatility. So like it's just a ridiculous amount of allocation, but that's because I'm 29 single and I know what I'm doing with my own money. A lot of people I wouldn't
Right.
recommend that. So even just, what I usually say, if they have a good job and they have, some money, I would say, put at least 25% of the kind of your assets in Bitcoin. So if you have a lot of stocks and stuff like that, just I would transfer some stuff and get 25% allocation at least to start with. And that's just because the timing of it, it's going to run away from you. Like if this was 2 years ago, I wouldn't say that, but as how I'm positioned in the market versus that's going to change based on cycles and stuff. But right now, yeah, I would try to get as much Bitcoin as you can with the liquidity that you have, and then start learning about it. And then because of that, you're kind of used to having stocks in the background. You're not thinking about it every day. If you just buy you try to buy some on Cash App or you try to stack every day without learning about it, you might be overwhelmed and stuff like that. But yeah, just dive into really just Michael Saylor. Anything Michael Saylor, go listen to like 10 podcasts from him. And I guarantee that you're not going to have at least a 5% allocation after listening to him. So
That's for
it's
sure.
like he's the best in the world at it. So because it's just one argument and it's just truth. And it's just like once you see it, it's like this makes it's riskier not to have any.
Absolutely. If you don't own Bitcoin, you're short Bitcoin, right? Like
Yeah.
it's and to see it being adopted institutionally is like it doesn't give me the like, oh, Bitcoin is legit. I already knew Bitcoin was legit, but seeing the ETF and that the kind of the career risk that traditional finance folks now don't have because of the ETF approval. We're gonna just the Overton window or just the way that people think about it is shifting, and so to your point, yeah, we've been in a bear market for like 2 years, maybe I got probably two years, and typically Bitcoin moves in these 4 year cycles, and so unless that cycle breaks, like we're looking at the next 18 to 24 months being a big bull run. Which will be exciting. It'll be a topic of conversation everywhere. Couple things that I just wanted to insert really fast for someone who doesn't know about Bitcoin. One, it has a scarce hard cap of 21 million. This sounds dumb bringing this up at this point, but like literally a lot of people don't know that. Like I was talking to a guy in the sauna the other day. I was like, yeah, there's only 21 million of them. He's like, wait, what? Like he actually didn't know. And so to the average person, when they hear you, I'm going to say shill, you're not shilling Bitcoin, but when you're sharing your knowledge about Bitcoin to the normie, it just sounds like you're pushing an NFT or like a Bored Ape or whatever. They can't distinguish between those things. So, yeah, I don't know. I just want to insert that really fast. I've got a bunch more notes. Let me reorient us,
Well,
and we'll
and to
keep things
piggyback on
moving.
that real
Yeah,
quick is just like even if they said that it's like okay then what keeps that 21 million? Well, it's kind of hard to know all the cryptography and explain it in a
sure.
articulate way. So like even if they do ask a real good question, it's like it's hard to even explain it with sounding like you have to be a very proficient in a lot of things in Bitcoin for and it's like the next question is okay why can't another cryptocurrency do it then why can't I just create one with 21 million? It's like
Hmm.
there's just so many things that go into it. It's almost like if they're skeptical, again, you start with not even like the solution, you start with the problem. That was another thesis of that article is just like
Hmm.
start with, well, actually, let's not talk about Bitcoin. Let's talk about your own money. What's the supply of, the Federal Reserve? Like what's the debt ceiling at today? How many trillions did we add onto the balance sheet in the last 30 days? You start attacking their own money, Bitcoin becomes like, okay, well then like what's the solution then? Bitcoin. So and then that's what it kind of that's my conversations now more than before or with the article.
Yeah. And to Steelman, what is, and I know, but I want to hear what you think of like, why can't another Bitcoin, why can't Bitcoin 2.0, whether it be from a hard fork or from something totally new from scratch, pop up tomorrow? Maybe it's better in certain ways. There's obviously going to be trade-offs. Like one of the biggest trade-offs with Bitcoin is the block size, right? So there's only 4 megabytes that can fit into a block, which 7 billion people transacting. Now you've got people putting added information into the blocks just to inscribe different things, whether that's text or images. But yeah, from your perspective, like what is it about Bitcoin? Has it achieved that escape velocity where it just, similar to the internet and email, right? There's like a TCP like protocol, open source, that every single person in the entire world who uses email uses that protocol. So is that the same thing that's happening with Bitcoin?
Well, yeah, I think one, the protocol level, the consensus mechanism, proof of work mechanisms, that's like the internet layer, that's the TCP. But that protocol, the TCP, didn't have a bunch of Wall Street guys marketing the shit out of it to try to pump it because there's actually an asset behind it too. So it's tied to coins, which the protocol layer is very useful for the internet, right? That's going to be very useful for Bitcoin, but there's an asset attached to it. So now you have that market lead of all these people that are in on Bitcoin. They're not going to let that lead up. You can't catch up to that network effect. The compounding effect is just too big. There's too many miners. Once it gets adopted and it gets settled on, it's the window for that to there was something called the fork wars.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2017, and that's when you had the Bitcoin Cash and all that. And there was 3, 4 forks, and there was big players behind it, and they were trying to make a new Bitcoin based on their own rules and visions of it. And the market worked itself out. That's what free markets do. There wasn't people you couldn't do anything about it besides just let it happen. People were forking, people were arguing, people were doing this and that, and it settled on this Bitcoin is the real Bitcoin. This is one that we all collectively think Bitcoin is. Now, for that to change, I just don't see it happening at this point because that's why Ethereum left, proof of work mechanism and stuff because you couldn't compete with it. There's only one proof of work chain that you need based on the game theory. The longest one wins, the strongest one wins, the one the most network effect. There's only needs to be one because you can build in layers. So they switched to proof of stake and then they pretty much jumped. It's almost like they tried their own blue ocean, but the proof of stake is just not the same asset. It's not, it doesn't have the same principles and what makes Bitcoin valuable. So pretty much it was almost like them giving up and they just went straight to marketing. So the interesting thing I think goes from here is, will Ethereum get its own spot ETF and stuff like that? Because I started to already see stuff like that, and I'm just like, I hope that they just end all this altcoin stuff and they only legitimize and institutionalize Bitcoin, and then they just let all this alt stuff trade on like Coinbase and stuff like this and other platforms, but you don't give it um, its own spot ETF and stuff like that. Because then I think no matter what, people are always going to see it as, well, it's just a hedge, and all that money can flow into Ethereum too, even though there's not really a good reason behind it. It's just a hedge almost. It's like, okay, well, I have 90% or 100% allocation of Bitcoin is the only thing I'm offered. Now there's this Ethereum thing. Well, let me put 5% in that, and then you can get billions of dollars flowing to Ethereum. It's like you could just completely pump up an asset that has, again, I've never used Ethereum for anything useful. I don't see really, again, it could have properties I'm not seeing, but like, just, it's not, I don't even see Bitcoin as really a cryptocurrency yet. It's just an asset to me right now. I mean, the world can't get
Hmm.
onboarded to use Bitcoin, which is fine because one, it doesn't need that to succeed. So
Right.
it just takes time. So like even all that stuff is maybe a little bit above my pay grade. Again, I've been focused more on the fitness stuff as of recent.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Oh man, I could sit here and talk Bitcoin for literally the rest of the day. And so yeah, I appreciate you just working through it. Yeah, I have heard about the Ethereum ETF. I know there's been some, and I'm above my pay grade here too, but there's definitely been like some legal, what do they call it? Legislation or whatever. Some rulings on the differences between Bitcoin and shitcoins. So to me, it seems pretty clear that the government, the SEC specifically, knows that Bitcoin has specific characteristics that make it more commodity-like, more asset-like, and less security-like. Obviously, there's no board of directors, there's no CEO with Bitcoin. It's the only crypto like that. All the other ones have, somebody who can flip it on and off, somebody who can change the code. They can get in a room together, small as this room I'm in right now, and all the coders can say, "Hey, let's change that cap, or let's change the rate of supply into the market," which would then impact every single person who holds that, likely in a negative way, right? They're not going to change it to like their other people's benefit at their own expense. Another thing I learned just this week, actually, and then we'll move on to the health and business stuff, is that game theory wise, like if you owned Bitcoin in cold storage, you held your own Bitcoin. In 2017, when Bitcoin Cash split off, and the term fork just means like and you know this, but like the blockchain is mining a new block every 10 minutes, like in a very linear fashion. One, then two, then three, TikTok, next block. The fork means that a parallel blockchain was created at a certain block. So 2017, Bitcoin Cash gets created. Now you've got two different blockchains mining a new block every 10 minutes or whatever Bitcoin Cash was. But the cool thing is that if you own Bitcoin in cold storage, you also would have that same amount of Bitcoin proportionally in Bitcoin Cash. So you could literally, if it, and potentially when, I hope the day comes that another fork comes, you and I with our cold storage Bitcoin knockoff can just sell that and transfer it right back to the real deal. So that's a pretty cool little kicker to maybe I'll ask last Bitcoin question of like, what is cold storage? Why keep your Bitcoin in cold storage? And what is it about self custody that makes Bitcoin this incredible invention?
yeah, it's a bearer asset. So I'm completely out of the financial system. So if if they freeze it up or whatever, I mean, if the internet goes down, I mean, there'd be big problems, but I think there'd be bigger problems than Bitcoin if the internet goes down. But um, yeah, so there's no third party risk. So I can take it anywhere. I hold it myself. I'm not worried about my bank going under. I'm not worried about having $250,000 or over, and if my bank goes under, I'm not insured over that. Or stocks, you think you own something, but really it's all locked into a Fidelity account behind apps and passwords, and you don't have the actual pieces of paper of shares that you own. So house you actually own, but they can come to your door and with guns and then, kick you out, or they can increase taxes. So car, again, these other things you actually own, it's just nothing feels better than just simply having Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network, knowing that this system has been up 99.9% of its uptime. It's better than Amazon in terms of like actual uptime of a network. It's the most secure. You just feel, everything that I know and most people know in the space about the financial system. It's like there you shouldn't be sleeping as well as you probably are with how much risk you're actually taking that you don't
Seriously.
perceive as risk. So the fact that I can sit here and have 100% of my net worth with me at all times, anywhere I go in the world, with no counterparty risk, it's that's just icing on the cake, because the volatility when it goes the right direction too. Now you're looking at it, you're like, oh, I have a lot more of this asset than I had even just like a month ago too. So it's pretty much everything in one. It's the safest thing you can own, along with like the most upside and the best asymmetric bet that I've ever seen. So it's that's Bitcoin.
Fantastic, man. Um, my first Bitcoin, the first time that I got my cold storage hardware wallet, actually transacted from Coinbase to the wallet and like got my node up and running. I'm not even kidding. It was almost a spiritual experience. Like I cried. I got my notebook out, my journal, and I was like, I just did personally in my own house with nobody, no third party, nobody hosting a server. Like I did the whole thing myself. First of all, researching it and learning it is very fulfilling, I guess. Like when you learn, when something goes from like far fetched, like that sounds crazy, how do they do that, to like a couple YouTube videos later and some articles, and now you're like kind of figuring it out. I just love that process. So I just wanted to share that. Yeah, I've just been going down the same rabbit hole as you, and yeah, I'm learning, still learning every single day. Like that thing about the block size, and I am constantly just taking in new information and trying to question my perspectives. Like the whole thing about, does Bitcoin have to replace the dollar over some short period of time? Maybe I subscribed to that early on and shifted to no. I mean, Bitcoin and the dollar will likely coexist for a long period of time. Uh, that over time that percentage is going to just shift, right? So
Yeah,
or like
that's the
the market cap.
ideal world. That's like the soft landing for Bitcoin is
Yeah,
like we as Bitcoiners, we don't want this thing to just go bust. I don't want to see it go bust. I'm already seeing disruptions in grocery stores and stuff like that. Like I want
right.
the world to keep working around me. I'm just saying there is a tail risk that like it could go bust, but I'm hoping that, like you said, it just you kind of merge into like this nice little transition between like, okay, these people get it, they transition, and then yeah, the dollar is it was always just a technology. It was just paper to hand out, to distribute gold. So like, there's no reason why Bitcoin couldn't be the underlying asset, and they still use
Exactly.
normal rails with just dollars. But now they have this transparent ledger where you can't audit Fort Knox. Like you were just saying, I can go spin up a node in my own house, and basically it's like auditing the Fed. You do it every 10 minutes, and it costs like $100, and everyone in the world can do it. Like that's the
Hmm.
difference between the monetary system that we have and Bitcoin. But that's like not close to like a starting argument. So like there's all these little nuggets that could be like these one liners like, yeah, Bitcoin's a pretty damn cool system compared to what we use. It's just the learning of our own system and then learning a whole new system on top of it, and then putting again all that emotion of money. Money is like the most emotional thing on the planet, besides loved ones and pets and stuff like that. But like money is the biggest tie. So there, when people start messing with your money, it's very, or people start telling you your money's bad, it's not something you want to hear. So people just go shutdown mode, or like they built their whole career on the fiat system, and they're telling them that it was basically you just inflated your way into a successful career. Like you didn't really do much besides just own an asset, besides the thing that was being depreciated for the last 50 years rapidly. There's a lot of barriers to break down. But like I said, I think the ETF is it's going to squash all of them because the price does the most talking. Number goes up, technology. Um, we've never seen a demand shock for Bitcoin. It's always been ever they've fought Bitcoin for the last, I've been in since 2017. It's always been a fight to even get these guys on NBC and stuff to even like talk remotely good about it. Now they're all pumping ETFs and yelling at the SEC and like it's so funny how everything just flipped. They're like, why isn't they got people three under Gary Gensler coming on their channel saying like, yeah, it should be approved like months ago. It's like this is kind of ridiculous. It's not like that kind of pressure. So this demand that it comes online tomorrow as a recording, it's the January 10th. So January 11th is supposed to go live and there's just billions of dollars that does not care and will just shovel 5% of whatever their allocation is at the same time into this asset. And it's a transparent ledger, which kind of circles us all back around. So yeah, it's not, as a Bitcoiner, it's not ideal, but what world are we living in? You have to institutionalize it somehow. How else are you going to get these institutions to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet? So having a transparent ledger, holding spot underlying Bitcoin, it's going to be a crazy product for Bitcoiners. So
All right, enough chat about Bitcoin. And just super stoked, man. I'm sitting here looking at the price, thinking, in October it was $30,000, and it's still like it's anyone's best guess that the price of the ETF is priced in fully, or maybe it's a sell the news type event. But the fact that we're still below all-time highs, there's like still these, the 100,000 six-figure numbers, kind of this like barrier. And I think when Bitcoin goes above that, it's going to have another like step function increase and just legitimacy. And so, yeah, I don't know where I land on, do I like the ETF or not? It is what it is. I always find it funny when people complain about the way things are. It's like, I saw someone complaining about, what was it? DocuSign has 7,000 customers and they charge $10,000 for document signing. It's like, dude, that's the free market. Like
yeah.
why does that exist? Because people are willing to pay $10,000 to have their documents securely signed. Like that's the value to the customer. So what are you complaining about? It's kind of the same thing with the Bitcoin ETF. It's like, oh my God, everyone's going to get rug pulled by BlackRock. And it's like, dude, they were coming at some point anyways. Like this is it's kind of just like control what you can control.
Well, that's what I'm saying with like gold or any of these other ETFs or any other commodity ETF, oil, whatever. Like you have to account for everything. It has to be physically accounted for. This is a transparent ledger that you can see at the end of the day. It settles every 10 minutes. Does BlackRock hold every Bitcoin that they say they own for customers or shareholders? So it's just like it's a yes or no, right? It should
Well,
be it
but
should be
like for
transparent.
Coinbase, take Coinbase for example, though. Like, are they liquid? Do they have every Bitcoin that their customers think that they own? Do they have that sitting in cold storage in their own ownership?
Yeah, I mean that's again, all that's going to have to be. It's all transparent. So if those answers should be able to be answered, if there's
Yeah.
enough like
Okay.
questions for it. So there's definitely some risk of like centralization and these coins being held by a custodian, but that's how it's always going to work. There's no way that the entire world is going to own all their wealth. Now, again, think about cash versus assets. People always use the bank. People always use stocks and stuff as an asset. I think of that Bitcoin being cold storage, for me. But like for most people, it's probably going to be institutionalized. And then the money they actually use eventually down the road is they use it like cash. And then you would have a layer two and you have Bitcoin and you own that cash. But most people, at the end of the day, they don't own outright anything. They don't take bare ownership of anything they pretty
Right.
much have besides, the car, house, and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
really, it's how the world's always worked. Now, is it ideal? No. And if you're a smart Bitcoiner, you hold your own Bitcoin. But like that, that it doesn't concern me that the rest of the world isn't doing it. Like I get that I've always been a little bit different. That's why we're Bitcoiners that we're here this early. But
Yeah, I mean,
like,
dude, I want to hear more about your story as well. Like, were you always sort of like a critical thinker? What was the aha moment there that like you started to be discerning?
I was 21 and I watched The Wolf of Wall Street. Actually, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna quit college and go trade. I'm going to go do financial markets. This is way more interesting. So I was in my third year of accounting in school. I was like, you know what? I can always go back. I'm gonna hate myself if I don't try something else. So I was 21. I got a pretty good job with a good startup. Worked with them for 4 or 5 years and got my start into markets. And then that's how I led into Bitcoin. I worked for Bitcoin Magazine, jump jobs there, and then from Bitcoin Magazine went to produce for an individual Bitcoiner, Mark Moss, and then now I'm at the stage. Okay, I want to run my own business, but yeah, it was always like I don't want to go spend $200,000 to get in debt to get a job that is really not that to make $60,000 a year to $100,000 a year. It's like that just doesn't make sense. I'm like, there's risk in going to school, and that was so I've always been critical thinking, I guess. And then when I just started learning about the markets, they're so much more interesting than anything else because it encapsulates politics, tech. It was everything. Markets, there's a price for
Hmm.
everything. So no matter what you're interested in, there's something in the market to reflect that. So basically, markets, that they're just the top of the funnel, the money, right? So it's money, and then it goes to the markets, and then you go into businesses and jobs and stuff like that. So I always started at the top of learning, like I said, macroeconomics and stuff like that. So I was pretty primed,
Yeah.
but because there was not that much education out in 2016, 17. I mean, there was, but not nearly what there is today. The thesis was not there. There was so much more uncertainty with these other altcoins and things like that. Like there was actual realistic, like is Ethereum like is going to be a scale and are we going to be able to do this and blah blah blah. So like now it's just so clear cut. Again, it could just be a store value asset with these institutions and a spot ETF, and we can go from $1 trillion asset to a 5 to 10 trillion dollar asset, and it doesn't have to do anything more than it's already doing today. It just needs
Hmm.
time and allocation.
Yep.
But during that time, we want to be building in case things do go wrong. And you need to actually have a parallel system. So it's not saying we don't ever need it, but like the parallel economy is not anywhere close, in my opinion, which is a good thing because I don't think Bitcoin's ready for it. So give it another 5, 10 years, build out these solutions, have people understand it, have them first hold it. Because once again, like we talk about, once you hold it, once you start learning about it, then you want to go try out the tech. And then it can be this fun little thing that you're
Right.
trying. You can't just have this whole new system that's like 200 years of civilization. We're just like, okay, yeah, let's just start this new one tomorrow. Like that's never going to be
For
how
no,
it's going to
with
work.
no pain, with no, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, again, start with just people learning about it, holding it, and then they have fun, they use it, and then that eventually turns into these little niche communities, and they start using it in towns and rural areas and third world countries, and then it goes into like Wall Street will use it last. But the fact that people are upset that Wall Street now is getting into the trade, it's like we are starting the firing gun at 50K. Like this is
Hmm.
beyond any Bitcoiner's wildest dream. Like we haven't even begun. People are saying, what inning are we in? Gary Gensler just threw out the first pitch today. He just accepted it. He didn't. We haven't even started the game, and people are just like, I can't believe how negative some of the stuff. I go on to. I'm just like, guys, that is so idealistic. You're not being a realist. Like you're being over. Again, you need that culture at the beginning, but we're at the point where like Bitcoin doesn't care what you think about Bitcoin anymore, right? It's too big for that. So these toxic maximalists, it's like I get it. It's not real adoption, but at the same time, number goes up does create real adoption. It just the numbers are way too small for anything to work at this point. The numbers of adoption, the price of it, like everything is just way too small. It needs to just be again tomorrow billions of dollars just get to start go okay I need 1% of this and they just all pile into this thing like 100K Bitcoin by the end of February is like I'd be kind of upset if that wasn't the case. Like it should at least 2x here within the first like 2 to 4 weeks of trading, just because it can't be priced in if the rails aren't built yet. There's billions of dollars, not just people, but billions
That
of dollars
literally
that
hasn't been able to move. Yeah.
they don't have access to it unless they want to go in and do all the regulations of their internal company and all the Sailor stuff talks about. It's like to actually get yourself onto a Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, it's so much work that now it's just every asset, even like a big tech ETF can be like, you know what, maybe we put Bitcoin in here, we put a 5% allocation. So I don't know if you saw this, but ETFs were,
Right.
it's not only these five ETFs, but other ETFs that hold a bunch of other assets are allowing these ETFs to go into their ETF. So it's just literally, it's not accessible to Wall Street yet. Gary Gensler just fired the gun and we're at 50K.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing, like I said, that's without countries, that's without companies, that's without other millionaires, billionaires. Like, no one's in on this thing yet.
Right. I always try and put it in perspective. I'm like, a couple months ago, the market cap of Bitcoin was under $500 billion. And I said I would actually, this is one of my go-tos of like the two statistics that I knew were early are the percentage of market cap, Bitcoin versus gold was like 3 to 5%. So if Bitcoin theoretically could take the same amount of market cap as gold, which it could and will because it has all the values, the traits of gold plus some, in terms of being able to move it, secure it. What were you going to say?
So this is the stat that I just kind of saw the other day. There's actually hundreds of trillions in paper gold out there. There's only 13 trillion in physical gold market. So that's something you can't do
Oh,
with
wow.
Bitcoin. So we're all comparing it to 13 trillion, but that's physical. So you can't again keep track of all the little pieces of gold in the world and then
Yeah.
assign it to a digital asset. You can with Bitcoin. It's a transparent ledger, which we talked about earlier. So there should be, if we just combine those a little bit, like 13 trillion versus 113 trillion, where does the real trillion, what are we really going for? We're not going for 13 trillion. We're going for somewhere
Right.
closer to 100 trillion.
100. Yeah.
And that's value of gold today. So, but it has that flaw of it can be paperized. You can't paperize this thing because again, at the end of the day, at 4 o'clock tomorrow, when the market settles and this ETF is trading live, they're going to say how many shares were bought, how much Bitcoin do you own? That has to match up every day. You don't have that with Bitcoin or with gold because you can't audit it. You can say, oh yeah, I'm getting my gold next week in the shipment. I bought this much gold. Like that's
Mm.
the difference of this asset. And that's why this ETF is so incredibly like, Samson Mound's out here saying like it can go up to $1 million per Bitcoin here in a month or whatever. I mean, I think is really ridiculous, but that's what we're dealing with is like Wall Street has never even dealt with something like this yet because there's only one technology that has a transparent ledger. So there's not a single ETF, spot ETF that is as good as the
Right.
Bitcoin spot ETF because nothing is as audible or transparent as Bitcoin. So there's just no product like it. And
Yeah.
like, I just people are missing it because they're so upset that this is not the Bitcoin way that
Mm.
how else are you going to get literally the Gary Gensler tweet got like 20 million impressions in the first hour yesterday. There's nothing like it right now of like the attention on Bitcoin. So when you have the momentum and kind of like we were talking about with the content earlier, it's like people are listening right now. So this is the best time for people to be engaged is when number goes up and then that's when number goes up. Like that's when they listen. It works better than anything else. And the last 2 years is testament of that. Like it's the classic, okay, how many friends have texted you about Bitcoin? Like
Yeah.
last 600 days, zero. The last 10,
Yeah.
a lot. Like it's just human psychology. It's
Yeah.
insane. And yeah, we didn't get to talk too much about fitness, but
It's all good, man. We can do a whole nother podcast on that. I got one question on it, but yeah, I think to your point, right? Like, let's talk about what's timely and what people want to learn, and listen to, and I hope that if you've never listened to anything about Bitcoin, there's some little tidbits that got you excited and kind of lead you down your own journey to learn about this thing. And I've noticed, and someone asked me on a podcast completely unrelated to Bitcoin. I was just being interviewed about Earthy. They asked like, what's one book that has changed your life? And I said, obviously I have to say the Bitcoin Standard. And then I went into this whole spiel about how literally seeing the world through a Bitcoin perspective makes you a better person. Cause like you go from like, oh, I might buy some stuff that I don't really need. Just one example, but like I might buy something or spend money on something that, the opportunity cost, if there's no Bitcoin, is I have to invest in something else, or where would I put that money? I don't know. Maybe I'll buy a new bike or something, which that's good value. That's good investment. But once you know Bitcoin exists, now everything you buy, because money is time, you're trading your time, which is, you know, if you hold dollars, devaluing, so you want to get those things out of your account as fast as possible. If you hold Bitcoin, it's increasing in value. So like every time you spend any dollars, that's less Bitcoin that you can buy. Therefore, you're like sacrifice to buy. I think Warren Buffett talks about like if he bought like a coffee when he was in his 20s, the compounding value of that when he was in his 60s would be like $1,000 coffee or something. So like if you think about the world through like every little decision that you make to spend money or not, to work out to not, like over time those compound, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there, you're like, whoa, I did stack like a couple grand off these like $20 or $50 a week buys. So man, yeah, I'm super stoked. Appreciate your time coming on. I think definitely would recommend people following you, because as far as like health content, Bitcoin for sure, there's a million different directions that we can point you. The Michael Saylor, Robert Breedlove 9 episodes that they did is pretty good. I haven't listened to all those because I was kind of further along in the journey when I came across it, but I love Robert Breedlove. He has a recent episode about how price is truth, and how kind of ties back into what you were saying about price leads markets, and you can learn a lot about. I mean, why do all the banks and the tech companies want to know what all of our transactions are? Because they get to learn a lot about us. That data is valuable. So, what is the last question I want to ask you about is more about health. What's your, like, if you were to say you're at 0 to 1, like what's kind of just a base protocol for you that keeps you healthy, that you have seen be sustainable and anybody can implement?
Yeah, so I kind of went on a journey of from like 20 to 30, let's just say, of like what actually moved the needle, what worked, what didn't work, and like all that. So what I came up with was I call it the open source fitness protocol. It's 10K steps a day, 3x workouts a week, and one ingredient foods, so just whole foods, and 8 hour eating window. So the first thing I would say, if you're starting your fitness journey, fix the body before you start fixing your routines. So don't worry so much about diet, because you're going to be hit left, right, and center every day with a million different decisions on food. So don't even worry about it yet. Start with one decision. Did you get 10K steps in? And did I eat within an 8 hour window? If you can get those two things down, you're significantly above the average person. If you just walk 10K steps a day and eat in an 8 hour eating window without anything else. Once you start doing that, you're going to start feeling better. You're not only looking better, you're going to feel better, which is more important, because when you start feeling better, then you're going to start making better decisions. And then you start doing the diet stuff. And then the workouts, you simplify it. People are in there hurting themselves. They think they need, wrist wraps and weight belts. There's actually a lot of studies done on long length partials, which are the most stretched position of the workout, of the exercise, and that's going to create the most muscle growth. So if you're looking for stamina, endurance, and performance, yeah, maybe train more like an athlete. But if you just want to look good, feel good, and you want a normal routine, you train long length partials, which I use dumbbells, lightweight dumbbells, not super light, but create a healthy amount of tension when there's never pain. And again, that's more stuff that I try to teach and communicate. But like those 3x workouts are very enjoyable. So when you put those things together, and you execute that protocol for, I would say, no more than even 60 days, you'll look better than you ever have. Like I'm talking, like I used to do three sports in high school, train all year round, and I've never looked better than I have right now doing less work and feeling better, because I don't do it for look at this point. I'm 29 years old. Not as much of a incentive as when I'm 18 in high school. So I was doing a lot more and getting a lot less out of it, and a lot
Yep.
better age, right? People are always like, oh, I'm 18. I wish I had that body and my genetics. It's like my tagline is actually change your genetics. I had better
Mm-hmm.
genetics at 29 because of my habits. My metabolism was faster, higher testosterone. I'm, increasing muscle, which means my growth hormones at healthy levels. I'm doing all this naturally by using this protocol, because I'm not doing things like heavy intensive cardio, which sucks and is not maintainable or sustainable. I walk 10K steps, so never do cardio. Yeah, I'm not saying you can't, but like treat it as like a workout rather than like I do this as a normal routine. Don't skip walking because you think you're going to get more out of running. Like
Mm.
that's what a lot of people are wrong. Eating, I don't avoid carbs. I just eat whole, clean, animal-based diet is the easiest way to kind of describe it. So avoiding carbs is actually detrimental to my testosterone and my libido and everything. So I actually don't recommend going no carb. If you're above 20% body fat or above 15% body fat and you want to get down a little bit leaner quicker, yeah, you can go lower carbs, but I would never recommend cutting carbs out of your diet for more than, a month or two. Just from personal experience, because I've done both, it's just there's no reason not to. Again, feel better, look better, everything's better with carbs. Healthy carbs, I eat fruits, and that's the majority of it, fruits and honey. And then yeah, I think the 8 hour eating window. People think it's for calorie restriction. This is where all the magic happens. This is where you give your liver a break. And when you give your liver a break, you're going to restore your metabolisms. And your metabolisms are not just burn fat or how much calories you can burn. They actually, metabolisms break down fats, protein, and carbs. So if you're eating carbs and you're getting fat really quickly, it means you have a bad metabolism, most likely. You have a liver issue, which means you want to, take a break. Basically, it's like a busy worker, and think of you're eating all day and like it already has so many tasks it has to do that's behind, and then you go eat more, you give it more tasks. So it's like, oh man, I haven't finished what I've got. Like, and you're giving me more. So you're constantly overworking that liver, and then that will again also help the breakdown of protein. So if you have trouble building muscle, that metabolism is not only you're not only not able to burn calories, but you're not able to break down proteins to get into your muscles, and then the metabolism also transports it to the muscles. So your body is just fundamentally not functioning that high, most likely, if you're not eating an 8 hour window, or at least for a little bit, and get your body working healthy again. But even then, I can tell when my body needs a break from food. So that intuitive feeling alone, if you've never fasted, intermittent fasted, and done it for a long enough period of time where you feel the effects and you feel the difference, then like it's very hard to get your body to feel healthy, even with diet and routine. So that's the probably one of the best summaries I've had of open source fitness. But that's what I do, and that's what came out of it. So I didn't come to it and say, how do I get healthy from like a research standpoint? I just over the last 9 years, this is what I do. I wrote a book about it, and that book ended up being 4 bullet points. I summarized them 4 bullet points. I'm like, well, damn, I wish I would have known. But you have to get all the information out first, and then you can summarize. So I did. It's all open source too, so it's free. It's I call it the Alpha Blueprint, and basically, I just realized that I'm getting into elite shape. And I go in the gym and I feel better than other people. I am able to, again, at the time I was working a whole 9 to 5, starting a business and keeping up with fitness like routine. Like not only looking, people are on cuts and they're dieting, they're, putting all their effort into this one thing. I'm looking better than them in the gym, feeling better than them. And that's like the third thing on my list of priorities. It's like, I was worried
Right.
about Bitcoin. I'm worried about my business. I'm worried about my job.
Hmm.
These people that are literally training to look aesthetic on stage are spending 100% of their time on their routines in their body, and they weren't even getting as good as results as me. It's because
Wow.
that's how bad the fitness information is out there, because they're all cutting carbs, they're doing all this stuff to just like get to this peak performance for a week. They're not at all healthy. So I've never competed, never done anything like that. And really don't dive too much even into the research, and there's a million different studies and all these people going over studies on YouTube and stuff like that. I'm like, well, what are your results? Why don't you look the way you do? If you know all
Hmm.
this information, I don't care if you're 35 or 45. Like, I'm getting better as I age. I know it's easy to say at 29, but I mean at the same time, from 18 to 21, you would say that's probably the easiest time to look your best aesthetically, and I would say I'm tenfold better aesthetically healthy and looking and healthy, like feeling healthy at 29, which doesn't make sense. I'm looking at everyone around me, they're turning 30, they're looking like they're turning 45. People come up to me and they say it looks like I'm 23.
Hmm.
So I would assume, again, I guess time will tell, but at 40, I'll look closer to 30. And because what I do is not, I just do it because it makes me feel better, which I
Hmm.
don't think a lot of people do that with fitness. It's always about like, self-esteem thing, a confidence thing, an ego thing, which is fine too. It can start that way, but eventually, if you're going to sustain this, you're just going to have to enjoy what you do. And that's what the fitness industry teaches is not enjoyable, sustainable, or healthy. You can't sustain, doing heavy cardio and, eating chicken and broccoli with no nutrients and doing all this stuff, loading yourself up with seed oils or protein bars just because you want to get an extra 20 grams of protein because you think it'll grow muscle. Like I, I would consider not tracking protein and not tracking calories and only tracking ingredients and eating windows. And like right there alone, like again, everything's going to go in the right direction from there because it's first principles thinking. And I've gotten a ton of good feedback on it. So about 3,000 people have downloaded the book and blueprint, which I'm pretty excited about. I think that number, again, I haven't been focused on growth, but I'm really hoping to like double that this year. So get another 3 to 5,000 people downloaded and onto this kind of routine and just helping people from there. Because once you realize it and once you start doing it, then it becomes easier, not harder. Because, like I said, you'll see the results, you'll feel better, you'll know it works, you won't have loss in confidence, and you'll be like, I've never been able to do fitness or health in my life, but this is super easy. And I think I can actually do this for the next 10 years. And that feeling there is like, that's that hope feeling that you get with Bitcoin. And that can tie back into the synergy of like, okay, Bitcoin is hope with the financial system of the world. I got my own health under control using this free open source protocol. And then, then you start working on your own passion to just entertain your day. And that's what mine just happened to be this brand, a fitness brand. I'm like, I see a huge problem in the world. I can help people. Let's go do it. And if we make money, if we don't, whatever, like at least I'm going to help people. So I helped 3,000 people this year. To be honest, I haven't made as much money as I thought I was going to on the business side, but that's a part of it. And that's, again, helps with Bitcoin because really my first job is managing my Bitcoin position. That's what it's been from, 2017. So kind of went all in on Bitcoin. Actually front ran Michael Saylor. I have a tweet out there that Cash App stopped letting me buy Bitcoin. I hit the monthly limit, so it kicked me out,
Let's
wouldn't let me buy
go.
anymore. And then the week later, Saylor announces the MicroStrategy uh, buying strategy. So actually, that was my uh, cool story about Bitcoin. I front ran Michael Saylor.
Claim to fame.
Yeah,
Yeah. I saw Preston Pish tweeted at you as well. That guy's really solid,
yeah.
super smart guy.
So he actually is doing open source fitness, or has like read the
Cool.
blueprint and gave me a good testimonial on that, and just wanted to thank me for like my robust knowledge and fitness again because I think it's a very different, unique approach. My whole approach is I showed you my blueprint, but within these four protocol frameworks, you can do your own, make your own, right? However, you need to make 10K steps work, make it work. If you need to eat in the morning instead of night, do that for your 8 hour eating window. If you want to work out Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and those are the only days you can work out, okay, then, or, you just do whatever you need to do to make that protocol work. So I made a framework rather than me saying like, you have to do this to get results. Cause I guarantee you will get the best results if you maintain it and sustain it. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you enjoy it and if you make it your own in some way. So, and not only did I kind of show what I do detailed, like broke down actually my monthly budget, like how much I actually spend on everything versus like just do these protocol things. And that's also Bitcoin gave me the idea of like work within a consensus mechanism, work with a framework, work with a protocol, and then so that's what I came up with too is like so Bitcoin teaches you a lot, not only just financially but just again how we were talking about earlier of changes your worldview and kind of everything. So
Austin, I'm gonna just wrap it up right there, man. I'm glad we took the time to touch on health because I just learned a lot hearing you, and I really appreciate the simplicity of the framework and the protocol. And personally, I'm not someone who likes to be told what to do, so point me in the right direction and kind of like incept it in my mind that I'm actually the one in the driver's seat. Then I'll do it. So I think a lot of people are like that. I appreciate you coming on. Hopefully, we can do this again. Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, man. And let's see what happens tomorrow.
yeah, let's see what happens. And I would love to come back on, maybe talk about this price here in a couple months, right? So it'll be probably a lot of fun to, rehash some of the things we were talking about today at 46,000. add 100,000 to that, right? That could be us in a couple months. So we'll see.
I have to ask, is there a price at which you would start to think about like taking some out and buying a house or a new car or something like that? Or are you like, I don't care how high it goes? Like, let's say it runs to 400K next month. Are you worried about, hey, I might take a little out in case it goes down? Yeah, I don't know how you're thinking about this, but
This is actually really important and something that I actually, this was before I started fitness and on my journey of what I was going to do. I was actually going to run kind of a trading newsletter. So I wrote a whole kind of email write up article on my strategy, and it's basically just a bear market strategy. And there's an indicator that I use based on price, volume, and volatility. I look at it every day, and that kind of gives me a gauge on what to do in the market. Now, my actual decision making is how I'm thinking about doing this. I think when that time comes, I think the last time it came up, it was like 54K. If I would have taken out some options, you don't actually sell your Bitcoin. You don't have to sell any hedge, and you're not really using leverage because you're protecting downside instead of trying to lever up this bull run. I'm just letting my Bitcoin do its thing.
mhm,
But on the once you have that purchasing power, and say Bitcoin's at $400,000, and I see this indicator pop up, and it only changes. Again, I have a whole write up on it, but I think there was like in the whole entire last bear market in 2 years, there was three decisions that were made, three execution things that would have been made with this strategy. So it's
mhm,
over a 2 year time frame, three decisions.
mhm,
And basically, it's you take out the an option, a put option to cover your downside, so you just maintain purchasing power. You're almost like it's hedging it out, but like that's really what options are used for. So we're
yeah,
going to dive more into that strategy. They're a little bit more advanced, but yeah, to actually sit there and sell and trade your Bitcoin, it's very tough. I wouldn't recommend it for most people. But again, my background is I manage my own money, have for a long time. And then also I have experience trading in the markets. And also I have this plan 2 years ahead of time because of what I learned from the last cycle. The amount of purchasing power I didn't capture was just that
mm,
it was a weak spot for me to say I'm never selling Bitcoin. That was the wrong decision, the wrong mindset to have for me. For a lot of people,
mhm,
probably not. But me, I'm almost like I'm using my Bitcoin to live. So it's almost like, like I said, I'm
right,
on Bitcoin standard. I work for myself. So anything I don't make in my open source fitness business, it comes from Bitcoin. So for me to say just I'm price agnostic, that's not the position I'm in.
right,
That's just not how I'm playing it. Most people, you're probably just, I have my 9 to 5 job and I'm just stacking sats, and you probably weren't stacking for the last 6 years like I was and stuff like that. So like it's
yeah,
always different. Most people, anyone getting into Bitcoin now, you don't trade your Bitcoin. I'm just in a position,
yeah,
yeah, I'm just in a position now where again I've seen two cycles. I have close to 10 years of trading experience, and I'm only doing it with my own money. I'm not doing it. So I have the ultimate skin in the game.
mhm,
Um, so yeah, I do plan on trying to, I would say the goal would be maintain at least 80% of my total value, right? So
mhm,
like that,
mhm,
that would be insane if I had 80% of my total value purchasing power that I made in the last cycle at 69,000, but letting it go from 69 to 15. I mean, that's an 80%. You could have done a lot of things and maintain more than 20% of the purchasing power. Um,
mm, I see.
which is so there's, but again, I would say I'm not going to put a time frame on it, but I have an indicator. I have a clear, this is the time to do this strategy
Mhm,
already in place. It's not going to be, oh, I think this is the price. I think it's overheated. I think it's this. It's over the next, probably, I would say 8 to 12 months. It will probably give a significant pullback. Maybe it's not 80%, maybe it's a 50% pullback, but at some point, this is going to get, it's just how markets work.
overheated. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So yeah, the thing here for me is I'm actually, again, I wouldn't want to go, 80% cash. I wouldn't feel comfortable. Like we were talking about earlier,
No.
I don't want that much money in the system. I want to hold the Bitcoin. But luckily, they have, again, products like options that you can It's not really necessarily leverage because if it expires, it just goes to zero. So there's a cap on how much you spend. So you know your risk in there. You weigh out if it goes to this price, this is how much you make, and you hedge it out. You say, okay, if
Hmm.
this doesn't happen, then it goes to zero, and I wasted 20% of my capital, but it didn't go down, so I still have 80% of my capital. If it does go down, then this option will pay for 80%, and then I'll keep 80%. So you can work those numbers out. If you don't use leverage on your actual position, you use leverage against your position. And I'm not only
Yeah.
using leverage on the downside, which no one calls the downside. It's extremely hard to. And the Bitcoin community gives Hedge Eye guy Keith McCullough a bunch of shit, but that dude can call downturns. So if
Hmm.
he doesn't get Bitcoin, but like he gets markets. So when there's another big downturns, I've seen him call the tops in the S&P markets like 3 times now in a row.
Wow.
That's probably around the
Wow.
time that I'm saying, okay, well, we've been in an 18-month bull market in Bitcoin and we just went up. We're at 557,000. Who says we can't pull back to 200K, right? Like,
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
so I know it sounds good in hindsight, but again, the experience, and I will be tweeting this out live and I'll get more into actually starting up a newsletter. This is another thing about being a solopreneur. It's like, yeah, I want to do this health stuff, but like the attention's really not there on health right now. Maybe
Hmm.
I, get really into the price stuff and try to help people there with, really framing where we are in the cycle. Because again, I think above average at doing that too. And I have a newsletter that, I mean, I called up only on 28K October 19th, and literally the next day it went to 30, and then the story, we're at 46. So the exact day is like I did it all in real time. Um, at that scale, I didn't make any trades on that. I just kind of that's the framing I had. The scale and the trade is, it's like every 2 years you do something. And
Hmm. Hmm.
I think more Bitcoiners should. I'm going to voice my opinion a lot more when we get to a top than I have before. Um, I don't
I
think
love
anyone
it.
should hold an 80% drawdown. But it's hard to say go sell your Bitcoin too. But at the same time, it's like if even a fraction of the people, let's say 30% of Bitcoiners last cycle would have taken 20% off and just be like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to get greedy and like I'm just going to take 20% off and be like, this could change my whole view on life, and maybe start a business or do something with that money. It's at some point hoarding Bitcoins. It's not like, okay, go do something with the money. So that's kind of was
Hmm.
also where I was at the point too, is like, I have this money, I have enough time to work on my own projects. It was the smart choice. I spent a lot of freaking Bitcoin in the last year, but I learned a lot more than just sitting on Bitcoin. So there's always that trade-off too, is like everyone's going to make their own decisions. But that was really long-winded, but I definitely think, yeah, I will be selling some Bitcoin. I'll let people know when I am.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, no, I appreciate you kind of like framing up the fact that you're coming from just an actual professional trading background, and this is your full-time thing. This is your number one priority. What I love about Bitcoin is that the average cat like myself can just stack sats, stay humble, and not worry too much about. I get probably a Twitter bot every other day being like, how's your trading going?" It's like, for some reason there's just so much opportunity to take advantage of people who want to trade, right? Timing the market is harder than time in the market. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And this is an area that I'm personally curious, just longer term, like how do you kind of manage the fact that Bitcoin to this point has had these 80% drawdowns? Pretty scary. And if you're like starting a family in a few years and you're trying to maybe buy a house and all of a sudden there's an 80% drawdown, or you're retiring and like the timing just isn't great. So if you can learn and, have what you said was price volatility and volume, and just have some finger on the pulse, then at least you can avoid the 80% drawdown. Maybe you can jump out and lose 40, something less than 80%, please.
Yeah,
And then maybe also the 80% drawdowns don't keep happening, right? The theory is that volatility, as market cap goes up, with the ETF, whatever else, like it's possible that the volatility decreases. It's likely.
yeah, I would say very hard pressed to probably find 80% drawdown at the next one, just because it's going to be such a bigger market. asset class. We were sitting at, we're only at $1 trillion now. We're like 20, 30% off all-time highs. This is at a 5, 10 trillion dollar asset. Like that amount of money doesn't flow back and forth wishy-washy. These are just people that are allocating. And if you ever get to a certain point, there's just going to be a constant bid. Like I said, this ETF, you finally get to be institutionalized. So Bitcoiners are, hating on it, but it's going to mean a fundamental change in Bitcoin. Like this is just, it's not available to Wall Street, and now it is. So yeah, the volatility is going to have to go down somewhat. Now, it could still go
Hmm.
down 60%. Yeah, the stock market just went down, 40, 50%. But like, I still think we're going to see some volatility in the near term because we haven't seen adoption. But like 10 years from now, yeah, I don't think no one's going to have to worry about an 80% drawdown in Bitcoin in 10 years. Like that
Yeah.
just doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, while it gets adopted, we're sitting at again. I don't think we've even started the game. Gary Gensler just threw out the first pitch. This is going to be insane. It's going to be, the volatility is going to increase, I think, over the next year,
In the
two
short term.
year
Oh, wow.
versus, slowing down. But over the long
Mm.
haul, yeah.
All right, Austin, I'll let you go, man. Thank you so much for your time. Super, super stoked. I'm about to crack into my first meal of the day, start that 8 hour eating window, and get some steps in. So thank you so much. And we'll follow you on Twitter. We'll drop links down for that alpha blueprint. Anything else? Closing words?
Uh, yeah, just stack sats. Ignore my trading advice right now, so don't trade your Bitcoin and that protocol. It really, if you're looking at all for direction in fitness, if you've had some success and you want to get back to where you like your peak performance, I guarantee if you start doing that protocol, download the blueprint. And it's more not even just information, it's an inspirational thing. It's like it's to get you to go from click a button to change your life. That was the whole intention of what I did and when I wrote it. So it is 100% for you to, get going. And I do it by showing you and not telling you. So that's the
Epic.
that's the ending.
All right, Austin. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks.